All right. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here.
Renee, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. I know today we're going to talk all about vision and getting in alignment with that and what that looks like for all moms, not moms that are just working or just stay at home or just entrepreneur, but like what that vision is and how it's so important for that guiding like direction for our lives. But before we get into all of that, I would love for you to share a little bit about you and like how you got to this place. Like, why is talking about vision so important, so passionate for you?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start from the beginning.
The way back.
When my son, so my kids are from the way back. Yes, my kids are now 12 and 13. And when my oldest, who's 13, when he was around 3, I noticed some concerning behavior from him. I noticed some pessimism and negativity and
Mm,
self-loathing, and that really caught my attention. Now, of course, at the time, I thought, okay, so what's wrong with my kid, right? So
yeah.
took him to specialists, and we got all the books and doing all the things that you would do when you're thinking that something's wrong with your kid.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know it then, but he was getting it from me. He
Mm,
was, you see, on the outside, I was happy. I was doing all the mom things. I was his mom. And on the inside, I was a hot mess,
yeah.
right? I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling isolated. I was feeling out of control in mom life and just lacking joy. So I got busy. I started pulling apart my life, right? Okay, this
Hmm.
isn't working. This isn't working. So going through all the things that weren't working, and I got it all pulled out. And then I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And which is what we do. Okay, well, this isn't working. I'm going to change it. But I had it all pulled apart and I didn't know what to do next. And really, literally on my knees, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And it was right around that time that I went to a workshop and I met my coach, and my life completely changed.
Mm,
She helped me to
hmm.
see that I had brought in a bunch of baggage into motherhood from my own childhood. I also hadn't healed from the PTSD of his birth, which was traumatic. We almost
Yeah.
lost him. And so, what I want more than anything for my kids is for them to be happy, feel confident, and know that they matter. And I was teaching them the opposite.
Yeah.
So I decided, when I met my coach, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to be doing. I loved her method and the way that she was teaching it, and so I went and got certified as a life mastery consultant. And so, using my almost 30 years of yoga on the mat, my experience as a former teacher, and my experience with my kids, this journey of motherhood, I have put together this beautiful, like, an easy, I've used my whole journey to
Yeah.
create something. I had to regain control of my own life first
Yeah.
and get my joy back. But now I do it for other women, and I help other women walk through it without the staggering costs, without the time. Because man, it took years.
Yeah.
I know you're nodding. You know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you talk about that because I was like, I heard somebody recently talk about how she was complaining. She's like, gosh, I just can't spend like $20 a month on, whatever. And I was like, do you know how much money I have spent over the last few years? I was like in counseling once a week. I was hiring
Right.
big coaches. I mean, and I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars doing all of the work on myself that I have done up until this point. And I had somebody else tell me, she's like, well, what if you don't have those thousands of dollars? And I was like, neither did I, but it became so like,
Right. I
this
didn't
is
either.
so important. I have to make this happen. And
Yeah.
I don't know how else to do it. And so I did. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on you calculate it all in, like the conferences, the coaches,
Everything.
the counseling, like all of the things. Yeah, it's amazing. And how much time that took, right? Like I started my journey of from that same space that you were in and that feeling of so overwhelmed and burnt out and not feeling
Hmm.
any joy. I started that when my daughter was a baby and she's 5 now. So it's
Yeah.
been like 5 years
Right.
of continuing to morph and grow. And yeah, it's crazy. So
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
so I know you highlighted that. So, well, first off, let's backtrack. You have your podcast,
Okay.
which is the Vision Driven Mom, right? Or
Yes.
Vision, yeah. I was like,
Right.
for a second, I thought it was just
Yeah.
Vision Driven podcast, but it's Vision Driven Mom. Yes. So I
Right.
know that
Yes.
vision is so important for you and that you feel like it's so important for moms. And yet so often I think when we talk about vision, we connotate this like business sort of mentality, or it's only for entrepreneurs, or it's only for whatever. And I use vision a lot inside my program with decluttering and like
Hmm.
creating that vision. So, what is kind of your definition of a vision, and why do you feel like it's so important that every mom needs to have that guiding vision for themselves?
Yeah, I absolutely. So here was the thing. In that little introduction, I shared with you that I had pulled everything apart. So I was focusing on what I didn't want.
Hmm.
I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. But then I didn't know what to do,
Yeah.
right? Because I hadn't been taught. My gosh, I wish they taught this in kindergarten, right? To decide what you want so that you know where to go. You
Yes.
know, I work with moms all the time. Financial freedom. I want financial freedom. Like that is so great, but what does that mean? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so a vision is really a life vision is deciding what you want.
Hmm.
And the way that in the beginning, when I first was introduced to this, I didn't realize it takes some self-awareness first
Hmm.
to know yourself, to know your core values, to know what makes you tick in order to really decide what you want.
Yeah.
But that's where you start, you
Yeah.
start with deciding what you want. So then you have a gauge, how are you going to know if you've gotten there or if you're not there, if you don't know what it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you think about too, when you, if you are, maybe 5 years ago, we bought a house and we gutted the middle of it. So we had to create a blueprint, right? We hired somebody to create a blueprint so that the contractor would know the
Hmm.
steps to take,
Hmm.
right? So you have to decide what you want and move towards something. And there is something incredible about living, I call a vision driven life, where we're moving towards something rather than a circumstance driven life
Yeah.
where life comes at us.
Yep. Yep. I
Yeah, that's
100%
that's
agree.
a that's a vision. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's well, it sounds like it. From what I know about you and your podcast and the work that you do, you do it similarly. You have to decide what you want.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I was actually just talking with a client this morning, and she was talking about some stuff that she wants to do and just having some uncertainty and unclarity about like what direction. And I said, and we kind of talked about it. I'm like, the vision that you have today is probably not going to be your end vision. Like, but you start
Right.
somewhere, right? Like
You
you
have to start somewhere.
you may not
Hmm.
have the full picture of everything that it's going to create or where you want to go, but you have to have something to get you moving in any or a direction, right? So I know that you have three
Yeah.
core foundations of kind of creating and establishing that vision and what it looks like. So for
Hmm.
a mom that's sitting there and she's kind of wondering, like, she's like, gosh, I don't have that big arching vision, right? Like, how you create that? So I know you have your three pillars. I don't know if or three core pieces. I don't know if the FAB, if that is all of it, or if there's that person that's sitting there like, what do I do? How do I create a vision? Where do you start?
Yeah. So the FAB framework is three parts. It's focus, alignment, and becoming. So the focus part is where like I said, you need to know yourself. You need to have some
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness. um but you can also, so the focus is focusing on yourself and focusing on what you want. Now a lot some of them I knew when I first started this, I knew where I wanted to go for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. A lot of women that I work with do not. They have no idea what they want. So
Yeah.
what I have them do first is ask themselves that question: what do you know for sure? If you've
Mm,
ever watched Oprah, at the end of Super Soul Sunday, she asks all of her guests, what do you know for sure? I like to start in the beginning. What do you know for sure? What are your absolutes, your absolute yeses and your absolute nos,
yeah.
right? You can start right there for simply. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be, I'm going to be the next Mother Teresa. It doesn't have to be anything like, it doesn't have to be huge. You know,
Yeah.
I'm working with a client right now. She wants a tiny house. That's her vision. You know,
Yeah.
she wants minimalism. She wants simplicity in her life. So whatever that is for you, what you know for sure. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can take those, like I in the beginning focused on what I didn't want. You can take those things that you don't want and create solutions around them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be, we don't have to get stuck right there with the vision.
Yeah.
We can start with, what do you know for sure? Yeah,
Yeah. I like that.
that's the F in FAB, so the focus. And then
Yeah.
once you decide what you want, you have to align. So
Mm-hmm.
aligning your thoughts, because if you are, if you are having, let's say in your vision, along the lines of what you teach, and with the decluttering or feeling, for me, decluttering is a feeling of freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
want to feel free, you can't have these thoughts of claustrophobia, or you can your thoughts have to align with what you want.
Yeah.
It's an all day, every day, shifting your mind. You wake up in the morning shifting your mind toward what you want, and focusing on the good stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also aligning your energy, Renee.
Mm-hmm.
That, because I truly believe that mom sets the tone for the home,
I
right?
agree.
So
Yep.
if you are, all have frenetic energy, your household is going to have frenetic energy. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, the vision that what you're envisioning for yourself, your life vision, you have to align your energy with that too. And I almost like to put it on like a costume.
Yeah.
Like, what would it feel like to feel well rested, vibrant, and energetic?
Yeah.
For me, that's part of my vision.
Yeah.
But a little piece of it, but kind of putting it on and seeing how it feels,
Yeah.
right? and
Yeah.
and and feeling expansive. You want to feel, as soon as you go in contraction, you into contractive feelings, like
Uh-huh.
fear, doubt, and worry, or anger. You've lost it. You've
Yeah.
lost the connection with that vision. And the third part is becoming. Now you become the woman in your everyday life. So you become that woman. She's not a place to get to, she's not a
Mm-hmm.
goal to be reached. You become her with what you do every day, right?
Yeah.
So in those small things that you do now, like that, part of the becoming is putting it on. How does it feel to be me?
Yeah.
How does it feel to be me? Having this organized home. Ah, you know,
Yeah.
and putting that on, and taking those little steps, little tiny steps. I was on the phone with a client earlier, and we were talking about her health vision, part of her health vision. And she said, okay, so, first of all, she had this big, I'm going to meal plan, and I'm going to drink water, starting in January. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to be biking and walking. And I said, no, let's start with one.
Yes.
Let's start with one thing. And then once that's a habit, then we can add something else. But it's those little things. That's how we become, right?
Yeah.
That's how we become the women that we're envisioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I absolutely love and I 100% agree with. And it's so funny is that, I very much agree with the idea and the concept of like, what would it feel like if this was my reality, right? Like, what would it look like if
Right.
I were calm and peaceful? What would it look like if I did have this house? Like, would it look like? And just allowing yourself to get into that place of, like you said, like trying it on.
Yeah.
And I remember recently, a couple months ago, I was having some health issues and I was leaving urgent care and my blood pressure was like through the roof and they didn't know
Mm,
why. And I mean, I typically don't have high blood pressure. So it came totally out of the blue. And I called my mom, who works in cardiac health and stuff like that. And she goes, "Well, Renee, what would it feel like if your body was just, in great health and it didn't have high blood pressure and you felt okay right now?" And I was like, "Mom, I don't need this right now." But it just like kind of tricked me into, or triggered me into that space of like realizing how powerful our thoughts are, right? Like I was like, I don't need this. This is not what I wanted. I wanted the cardiac health mom right now, not the like feel good mom, or like change your thoughts mom. Anyway,
Right. Right.
um
Yes,
so
exactly.
like so much of this is, it's, yes, like you said, like we're not reaching a final destination. Like motherhood isn't a final destination. Who we are is not a final destination.
Right.
And that it's always about this becoming sort of vision, and like becoming who we are, and always learning to grow and always going forward, and all of that. So um yeah, like I think just looking at those pieces and having that vision up front changes everything, right? So,
Everything.
what
Right.
do you see is possible for moms when they actually step into this space of really adopting, like, hey, here is my guiding vision going forward?
Yeah, for one thing, there's hope, right?
Mm,
There's when you're moving toward what you want, and I'm going to tell you that this whole past year, if I didn't have that vision
yeah.
of and just knowing where I'm going, regardless of what is going on around me. I actually
Yes.
had a client back in March, and she said, we'd been working together for several years at that point, and she said, I kind of feel guilty because I'm really doing well.
Yeah.
She said, I feel I'm doing well, and I feel like we've been in training for this, because
Yes.
we're moving forward and we're not pushing away from all of the, I mean, not to say that I have not been had times of anxiety, not to say that I don't feel anxious every day. I mean, and that is kind of
Mhm.
part of my reality is I have anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So that I just have to work extra hard at changing my thoughts. But there's hope for one
Yeah.
thing, and in being so connected with the woman that you're becoming, that you're going to do what it takes, right?
Mhm.
And this is
Mhm.
this when working with a vision too. So you want to get it really crystal clear, as crystal clear as you can. And the more that you play with it, the more clear it gets.
Yeah.
In the
Mhm.
beginning, it's when people first start doing they're like, well, okay, whatever, I'm trusting you. But then, it's all about how you're feeling. So if you get really, really, really clear, and then you start feeling a little constriction, then you back off a little bit and let
Mhm.
it be a little more vague and open, and then you can get it. It kind of weaves in and out. So
Yeah.
it all depends on how you feel. Once your vision starts feeling constrictive, you back off a little bit until it feels good again.
I
so
like
um
that.
so yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's hope for moms, and
Yeah.
that you're having to have something to move towards, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever it might be.
Well,
And
and
again, it can be for a little bit of space. It could be for, having I love the clutter free mind. It's
yes.
just not that we're ever, now that is actually ever going to happen, because we're always going to have clutter in our minds, right?
Yep.
But we can more easily clean it out.
Yes. And I think that that's the goal, right? Is like, and even for me, like when I talk about clutter, it's not a one time thing in your home, even like, or
Right.
your minds. It's a
Yeah.
journey. It's about adopting this new way of living and new way of going forward, and having that as like a guiding thing going. And for me, like that's a big, like the whole first section of when somebody joins into my program is establishing that vision. Like, what do you want to create? Because it's
Right.
going to be unique and different for each and every single one of us. Like, you might walk
Yeah.
into my house right now and think, gosh, this doesn't look clean. But yet somebody else might walk in and be like, oh my goodness, this is so much cleaner than my house. And
Right.
everybody's threshold of what they feel good in and what they feel like they can relax with is going to be different. So it's not
Yes.
about achieving some standard of perfection. It's about, what does that vision look like for you,
Yeah.
unique for you, and what's going to give you that end result that you're looking for, whether it be time or space or fun or joy or whatever it might be. So
Yeah. Exactly.
this might be totally a little bit tangential and something we
Uh-huh.
didn't talk about before, but I have had, you brought up 2020, and
Hmm.
for me, I looked at 2020. I mean, it had its obstacles and it had its things that needed to overcome. And you talked about like anxiety, and like all of
Right.
life is going to have some sort of challenge and obstacle that we have to overcome.
Mhm.
But you talked about like even just that clutter in your mind, right? Or those thoughts that you're having. I had this word or this phrase come up with somebody in this last year about some of the stuff I was doing as being like toxic positivity. And it really struck me in this
Hmm.
phrase because I really don't know that toxic positivity is truly a thing. I mean, maybe it could be,
Right.
but I think that there's this like borderline between how do we continue to have like this vision and looking at all of the different things that come along the path on our way to the vision, and still like whether it be challenges, whether it be obstacles, whether it be things like 2020, like all the things that happened,
Mhm.
right? How do we continue to ride that balance of seeing those things in that positive light, but not being what somebody would describe as like toxic positive? Does that
Right.
make
Yeah.
sense?
I think I get what they're saying is
Mm-hmm.
that maybe not, I would not call it toxic though. That's interesting. That's an interesting phrase. But here's the thing. Life is life, right?
Yeah.
Life is 50-50. We have, 50% desirable, 50% undesirable. It's part of being human, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, throughout this year, that in this past year is, when the feelings come, let them come. Like, we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to push them away. Oh, I'm happy. That is a lie,
Yeah.
right? If you can't lie, yourself knows better than that. You
Yeah.
can't lie to yourself, but you can shift your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's what you can do. You can shift when you start going down that rabbit hole. You can start thinking about, I like gratitude. Gratitude is
Yes.
like the back door to abundance, right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
focus on something, there's always something
Yeah.
that you can be grateful for.
Yeah.
Right now, this kind of sounds silly, but I have the most incredible bed right now. I have, like, the mattress is perfect, the comforter is perfect, the pillows are perfect, like the sheets, everything is. So I wake up in the morning and I do this, there's something. I'm a yogi, so I like to embody a concept.
Uh-huh.
There's something about smiling that it does change things. Like, you're
Yeah.
focusing on, like, getting into my bed, and my son does this too. He gets into bed and he's like, oh, and just the
Yeah.
shifting from what's wrong to shifting into finding something that you're grateful
Mm-hmm.
for, but also allowing those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like whack-a-mole, right?
Mm-hmm.
That game of the fair, if you push the feelings down, they're going to come up over here, right?
Yep.
So you kind of let them. There's this kind of balance, right, between allowing the feelings but not staying there. So
Yes.
and I think we're more afraid of feeling a feeling than actually, the feeling itself. It can, it's not great,
Yeah.
but I almost think that the thoughts of feeling that feeling are worse
Yeah.
than actually having the feeling.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of even brings me up because I think of like even this year, there was a lot of grieving, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, there was a lot of that time of allowing myself that space to grieve. But
Hmm.
I think the key difference behind it was the intention, right? Like
Right.
you allow yourself to feel grief, you allow yourself to feel sadness, you allow yourself to feel all of those like anger and frustration, you allow yourself to
Hmm.
feel them, but it's like inside your head, you're almost like telling yourself, like, yes, I'm feeling these feelings. I'm allowing myself to process through them. But I also know that there's these other positive things that I can be grateful for and gratitude, like
Right.
pulling that gratitude in. Rather than I think what happens is that people get into this feeling of grief and then it just continues to spiral into
Right.
all of the negativity. And so for me, when I heard that word toxic positivity, I was like, I don't feel like I'm toxic positive because I think that there's so much importance and validation in feeling those negative feelings. But just like you
Right. Me
said, is
too.
like you don't have to stay in those negative feelings and feeling like that victim, woe is me. It's like this empowering
Right.
intention that you bring to processing through those feelings, if that makes sense. Like it
Yeah.
just, and so
Absolutely.
it had me kind of thinking in the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about that phrase of toxic positivity and like, what do I really feel like that? And I was just curious to kind of hear your thoughts and feelings because I think we're kind of along the same lines of that.
Yeah, I do too. And the feelings are important
Yeah.
and we have to honor them. But like you said, we don't have to stay there. You
Hmm.
know, we can, you could just let yourself feel and then decide to focus and really let it move through your body. Let the feelings move through,
Hmm.
kind of take notice. Where am I feeling this? Where is it coming from? What
Yeah.
thoughts am I having? Because there was a lot this year. It was
Yeah.
really full of feelings. Like,
Yes.
I mean, we were all feeling the feels in
Yeah.
2020 and going forward too. Here we are,
Yep. Yep.
still plugging along.
I
And
know.
it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Just as long as we don't stay there,
Yeah.
allowing ourselves to stay there. And here's the thing about having a vision and moving forward is that I mean, I used to before I learned how to live a vision-driven life, there were times that I would fall, not literally, but like in my mentally, emotionally, I would fall and I couldn't get myself back up. And
Hmm.
when you're moving, living, moving towards your vision, you'll fall. I mean, everybody falls, but it's
Yeah.
easier to get yourself back up
Yeah.
because you know where you're going.
Yeah.
It's really an interesting. I mean, like I said, I wish that we were taught this in kindergarten.
I know.
I mean, this is what we can teach our kids to
Yeah.
move toward what we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny is like my kids go to like a leadership development school and stuff. And so they each have
Mhm.
wigs, each they call them wildly important goals. So each
Oh,
semester, each
nice.
month or whatever, they pick their own wig. And it's kind of that
Right.
instilling that same idea of like, what's your guiding vision this month? What's your really important goal that you want to achieve? And I think it
Right.
is something that we can empower our kids with. But it, like you said, going back to that sense of moms are oftentimes the guiding energy and the guiding life force within their homes. And so it
Right.
starts with us first, right? Like it starts
Yeah.
with taking care of us, making sure that we have a vision, making sure that like we have a vision for our whole family too. Like what's the
Right.
direction of our family? What are we trying to instill? And what are those core values you talked about? And creating some of that awareness and insight there is so helpful.
Yeah, I love that. My family, I've been creating vision boards for years and years.
Yeah.
Um, Much differently now in the past 5 years since I started doing the vision work. But this weekend, I haven't done it with my kids yet.
Uh-huh.
So that's what we're going to do this weekend. So we're going to sit down and we're going to do a family vision board. And then I'm going to help the kids make their own vision boards too.
Yes.
And I just really think, and it's I think what we're taught is, okay, so here's what you do to do well in school. So here's
Hmm.
what you do to do well in sports. But when it comes, when you get really clear about what is important to you, it's
Hmm.
completely different, right?
Hmm.
Than reaching the goals of others, right?
Yes.
These are goals that we want, and it's
Yeah.
it's hugely different. And what makes sense, like you said, with your home, right? It's what is important to you. It's not everybody else out there. It's not
Yep.
it's not your society or your friends or your family or any. What's important to you.
Yes. Yep. I 100% agree. And it's funny you mentioned that because I had on my list of things I wanted to do in January was to do vision boards with my kids, and it just hasn't happened. So I
Uh-huh.
think I'm going to
Right.
make sure that that happens because even just you think about like just taking that time and allowing them to do it, you learn so much about your kids too. And it's almost
Right.
like you're
Right.
instilling in them that it's okay to have these passions and desires and to want to pursue them or to grow in them or move forward and like have that vision. So I think it's just even if you don't use the vision board at all going forward, just spending that time allowing your kids like to
Right.
allow those pieces of themselves to come out is so empowering and so helpful.
Yeah, the self-awareness,
Hmm.
if we can instill that self-awareness in our kids, oh my
Yes.
gosh, I think
Yes.
about if I had had this when I was a kid, life would be so much different,
I know.
right?
I know.
For everybody, if we all had this, we'd be living in a different world.
I know. Yep. and we can always look at what we can do today to make the future's generations so much better. So I
Exactly.
appreciate, Tracy, so much you coming on and sharing with us today. I know you and I both resonate with what each other are doing, and just
Yeah.
thinking that like that same, like I talked to somebody yesterday. I was like, my vision and my mission is that sense of hope that
Hmm.
moms can get off of this feeling of hamster wheel, that just burnt out, exhausted, and overwhelmed is the norm of the life. And I think going counterculture to that and creating
Right.
our own like joyful, thriving, fulfilled sort of motherhood is so powerful. And I think, like you talked about, vision is one of the key pieces and key starting points for that. So I appreciate so much you
Right.
coming on and sharing that with everybody. If people want to follow you and get in touch with you, other than going over to Vision Driven Mom podcast, which I know Tracy and I would both love if you guys tuned in with both of us on our podcast and left a review and let us go into our DMs on Instagram or Facebook or wherever and let us know that you tuned in. But other than that, where can people find you?
Well, my website, and this is where like all the podcast stuff will be as well. It's www.visiondrivenmom.com.
Okay.
I am also at Vision Driven Mom, Vision
Everywhere.
Driven Mom on Facebook, Vision Driven Mom on Instagram, Vision Driven Mom on Pinterest. And yeah, please reach out and tell me that you heard me on Rising Moms. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you.
Yeah. I think people like, I'm so guilty of this too, like tuning into a podcast and being like, oh, yes, I loved that. That was so great. And then
Right.
just going along our ways. But, I'm sure that you are the same way, but I love getting feedback from people that listened in on the podcast. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
this resonated with me. This didn't. I really love this. I loved this episode or this guest or whatever. I absolutely love that. So I know for myself, when I listen to podcasts, I'm like being intentional about trying to do that for other listeners or like other guests, because
Right.
it makes
Well,
such a
thank
huge
you.
difference. But
It does. And I actually found you. I found you. I found Rising Moms through a podcast, right? So
oh,
I found
really?
you through a podcast.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah. We all kind of interweave, and it's so just, it's great to hear and connect with other people out there. And when people that are listening and tuning in reach out to us, like we as podcast hosts really, really love that. So,
Well, and then we
Tracy,
know what to do more of, right?
yes, yes, 100%. Like otherwise, sometimes it feels like we're just talking to the air.
Exactly.
So a little side note tangent there, but Tracy, thank you so much for hopping on. I hope that every single mom that's listening feels a little bit more empowered and inspired to create their vision and actually start living into that each and every single day. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Renee, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah.